It will not be that, you're talking about user story and then you start talking about requirement properties. That will be way off in the next session. So now let me come back and then continue from there, right? Very important. It will not be that, you talk. Okay, so now we are live. Okay, all right. So let's keep moving. So we talk about the fun facts about user stories and the other sessions. Welcome to today might be day 10, right? Yeah. We will continue with our agile framework or agile methodology. And today we're looking at user story grooming, right? User story grooming. I think already we've talked about a couple of things when it comes to user story grooming in our, I think in the grooming, ceremony. But to reinforce some of the points, some of the things that have already been shared, today we look at grooming proper. So as a PO, as a product owner, or a business analyst, your duty, I think the first day we talk about it, your responsibility is building and then maintaining the product backlog and also the refinement of the backlog. The refinement here means grooming, right? You want to make sure that your product backlog is healthy, right? By being healthy, that means there are stories all the time for the teams to work on, and stories have been groomed properly so that, there are no stories over there that are not complete. So every story over there, you have the right information in there that qualifies that story so to a certain level or to what we call definition of ready, so that the team members or development team, Scrum team can work on it, right? They can start, coding it and start working on it. So that is your duty. You have a responsibility to, write stories. Now, when you write stories, sometimes it might not be complete, right? Stories, sometimes you start it, maybe today, you might finish maybe tomorrow, or you might finish in the next couple of hours or something complete. So for the stories to be complete, or for you to be able to get to a point where okay, now this story is ready to go, we have a ceremony called grooming session, right? So grooming sessions sometimes it's going to be you, the um, the business analyst, the product owner, who will bring in their stories up at the grooming session, right? You bring the stories up at the grooming session. So when you bring the story up at the grooming session, sometimes um, you will have a limited audience. You have the tech lead. It's not going to be the entire, squad, right? The whole team that's going to be on this meeting. It might be just some selected few, like the tech lead for front end, maybe tech lead for back end, and maybe another developer, and maybe you will have, the UI UX engineer as well as part of this, and then the Scrum Master as part of this, or the project manager, or whoever leads this. But as you should keep in mind that this grooming session you might be leading, or the Scrum Master might be leading, because you have already coordinated with the Scrum Master. So you are bringing a handful of stories. It's not every story, right? So you're bringing a handful of story. I should have taken a screenshot of some, Jira board with stories so that, you guys can see the number of stories. And I'll just maybe highlight a handful of stories. This is an example of maybe this is what we are bringing up for grooming, so you guys can know. But we'll get into Jira, so that's no problem. We'll talk about this again. So you're bringing a handful of stories for the development team to groom, right? In grooming, these are what I have here. Well, what you guys can see on the screen. We'll be looking at these items over here. So removing uncertainty. So when you bring stories for grooming, what are you doing? You talk about it. So as a user, as a visitor, as a whatever, as a function or the persona might be, it's going to be out there. And then I want the ability to do something. So you have the story written out nicely. And then the expected or the outcome is also there so that I'll be able to do this. And after that, there might be description or additional information as part of the story. And then there might also be, acceptance criteria. There's going to be acceptance criteria in there as well. So you list all the things that the user will do, and they will see and will verify, validate all those things out there. So once you are done with this, you open it up to the team, to the team that are on the call, on the meeting, that are part of the meeting, and they say, are there any uncertainties, anything that we need to be aware of for this story? So, they might say, no, this is pretty much straightforward. Um, or they might say, no, we need to be able to have this. There are dependencies in here, or we need to have a prerequisite of this issue resolved before we can have this story done, right? So there might be something that needs to be done, or a task that needs to be done before maybe that feature that you have in that story can be worked on. So, this is the time that grooming, we talk about all these things. They'll start talking about it. Okay, we need to have this done. So you writing the story unknown to you, maybe somebody has been there for some time, maybe 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, maybe 6 years. They know some issues that will not let this story, be done. We cannot work on this story if that issue is not resolved, right? So all the uncertainties, all the unknowns, all risks and other things, dependency, will identify all the dependencies, that are associated or that might be connected, with this feature that you're bringing up, right? With a story that we want to develop. So at this session, this is where we talk about all these things and remove all the red tapes and all the barriers, right? So that we can work on this feature set, so that we can work on this story. Other than that, we're going to have issues when we take this story up to the next phase, which will be estimation, right? So when we go to estimation, there's going to be questions. And if the grooming session was not done properly, I can bet on this that it's going to fail at estimation, because what are they going to estimate? So when you tell them this story, same story at the estimation meeting, they will come up with all sort of questions, and that is where you know that there are gaps, right? You will immediately know that there are gaps in your story. So when there are gaps in your story, then you know that we need to fill in the gaps first before this story is ready. We will establish what we call definition of ready, and then we can bring this story up for pointing and estimation again. So grooming sessions are very critical. I would like to say that, when grooming sessions are properly done and when stories are fully fleshed, um, we will have a certain level of accuracy, right? When it comes to estimation, because we've talked about the story in its entirety, and every phase and facet of this story has been dealt with, right? And so when we are estimating, we really understand this feature and what it's supposed to do, right? And so we estimate it properly and say, this is a 2-point story, this is a 3-point story, a 5 points, because we know that this is going to take a while. You have so many things to do in here, right? So do with this story. So when grooming sessions are done properly, we were able to achieve or attain a certain level of accuracy when it comes to story estimation. So grooming will identify dependencies. Sometimes some stories are too big. So as we talked about the story at the grooming session with the development team, they might say, no, this is too big, let's split it. You see that this story, there's an A part here and there's a B part here. So why don't we split it so that this one will be independent and this one will also stand alone by itself, right? So there's going to be communications like that. There's going to be some things like that, where stories will be splitted. If it's too big, you have written and you thought, it's okay, but the team might think, oh no, this is too big, so let's split it, right? And then user stories clarification. So over there again, there's going to be elaboration, talk about it. You will get additional information. So as they talk about it, you'll be adding details to the story, right? So as they talk about it, they clarify certain things that you did not know. You will update the story, right? If it's part of the user acceptance criteria, you add that information acceptance criteria. If it's something that should come under additional information that people should know when they are developing this, put it under additional information or the description section, right? So that it will be additional information that people will keep in mind when they are working on this story. And the stories must also meet the inverse nature of a user story. So we'll be looking at that inverse, I think, momentarily. I think maybe the next slide or something, on the next two. What is the inverse? There is an acronym that stands for something, and we'll look at it very soon. So stories must meet that. So you're not just going to be, writing story for story's sake, but stories must meet the inverse, the characteristics of a user story, right? It must have value. The V in there means valuable. It must bring value to the business and all of that. So you keep those things in mind as well. So, and also at the grooming sessions, prioritization. Sometimes we will prioritize and other things. So when he brings the stories up, he said, no, this one is very critical. We need this story to be prioritized and be moved up, so that teams can work on it, maybe the future, the next sprint or the next 2 sprints or something like that. So stories are reprioritized, and their priority levels are changed, at the grooming session as well, right? So this is what we do at the grooming session. Okay, the inverse is here. Let's look at the inverse. So we talk about something over here that the stories must meet the inverse nature of the user story. So let's look at the inverse. So what is the inverse? So inverse is an acronym. The I, the N, V, E, S, T stands for something. So I means that can be a PBI standalone. So PBI simply means, product backlog item, right? So when you write these stories, it has to be independent. It should be able to stand by itself without being connected to any other story, right? So anytime you're writing a story, make sure that the stories are independent. It does not have any dependency on any other product backlog, right? Any other PBI, any on another PBI. So you make sure that the stories are what? Independent. Very important that user stories are what? Independent. The N stands for negotiable. So when it's a negotiable, this is the meaning. This is what we're trying to say. It can, can it be changed or adopted without any breaking any explicit instruction? So got to be able to bring stories up for in a meeting that stakeholders, development team, you can all negotiate on it. We can change something. We can bring something. So that's why you bring stories up for grooming. You're not going to be stiff. You're not going to be you're not going to be rigid and say that no. This is what I've written. And in the grooming session, you're telling them no, we cannot change anything here, right? So that's why we say it must meet the acronym INVEST, the user story characteristics INVEST. So stories must be negotiable. So that means we should be able to change something within the story, right? So this is why when you bring it up for grooming or when you write your story, make sure that, as you're bringing it for grooming, something can be changed, something can be added, it can be updated and whatnot, right? So that's what's negotiable. We should be able to negotiate on this story, right? Let's look at the V. Let's look at the V now. So for V, we say, does it have a value for the end user? So like I always say, stories must make economic sense. I think yesterday I was doing something and I had a meeting with somebody and I was telling him the same thing, that stories must have economics. It must, bring in something of economic value to the table, right? So if you look at the story, you look at it, you write it, and you know that what's the value over here? What does this story solve? It needs to solve something, right, for the business. So you're not just going to write the stories and just write it just because you need to fill your board, your backlog with stories. No. Does it have a value for the end user, right? And once you're writing it, as a matter of fact, you need to tie it to the overarching or the vision of the organization as well. So does it bring value? Where does this fit in as well, right? But your stories must bring value. That's the point of it. So keep in mind that when you're writing stories what deliver value, economic value. It must make financial sense, right? That we should spend money and hours, billable hours on this. Remember that when you have a story out there, some of your development teams, some of them are contractors, right? They are consultants like myself. Some of them are also full-time employees, and they are charging the company, right? Some developers are charging the company as much as, $60 an hour, $70 an hour. It goes all the way up to sometimes $150 an hour, right? So we're billing the company over $100 an hour, and they're working 8 hours a day, right? So if developers are going to spend, or the team is going to spend hours, developing this, and it does not deliver value to them, that means, you're doing the organization a disservice, right? Or they're spending money on development team to work on this, and you are not cutting it, right? For them, they're just spending money. And that should not happen, right? That should not happen. So let's look at the fourth one, which is estimable. So estimable means, can the team estimate on it? Can the team size it? So as you write stories as well, stories we must be able to size it, right? As estimation, we need to be able to bring the story up for estimation. It cannot happen that we bring a story for estimation, the team say, but how do we size this, right? So you want to bring stories up, we should be able to size the stories as well. And then the S in the invest acronym is for small. So is it small enough to be designed, coded, and tested within the sprint? So like I said, and I think I keep saying, stories must have one goal, right, in it. So is it small enough to be designed, coded, and tested within the sprint? All right. And then last one, the T stand for testable. So you know that you have testers, or quality assurance team members as well. So is it, if you look at the story, is it testable? Is it something that they can test? If your story is not testable, then don't bring it up, right? So it is not a story. If you have something that is not testable, then you need to categorize it or put it somewhere under under a different heading. It's not a user story. So stories must also be what? Testable, and that is the acronym for the invest, right? Who jumped out? Okay. So you need to look at it carefully and say, okay, how is this story going to be tested? And stories must be testable. Okay. All right, moving on. Moving on. Okay, moving on. So we were talking about size now, so let me also put this one in here. So user story sizing technique. How do we size a story? When we size a story, there are a couple of things. This list here might not be exhaustive. So there are a couple of things that we need to look at. So complexity, I was looking at my time to see where we are so I can allow for some questions as well. So we're looking at complexity. Well, we're looking at complexity of the story. So once we're looking at story, we need to look at how complex this story is. Where does this story lead to? What is connected here? The complexity nature of it will allow us to be able to size it properly. If it's just a front end, if it's just a UI, if there are APIs involved, there are some data, validations, and some data stuff also involved, some integration stuff. We need to know this so that we'll be able to do the right thing, right? So complexity is an attribute here that we need to look at when we are sizing a story. Business value. So we need to be able to look at the business value. Is it to us, external customers, internal client users, or internal end users? How does this support the overall feature set of the business and whatnot? So business value. And then also risks. We need to look at risks as well. You look at risks that are associated with it. Risks Not only that, so that's why I said this list is not exhaustive, and even assumptions as well. We need to look at assumption. Um, we need to look at assumptions as well. So risks, assumptions, um, complexity, business value, and other things. So you need to look at the amount of work that needs to be done, right? So as you're reading the story, they're looking at, okay, looking at this story, there are a couple of things that needs to be done. They are beginning to size it from a very far end, and they're looking at it, okay, this has to be done, this has to be done. We need to integrate this API in this platform. So I give an example of an API the last time that, for instance, if, payment, we need to have a payment on it. Payment is coming from a third party, right? Payment processing company. It could be Stripe, it could be authorized.net, it could be your bank. They might give us some payment gateway API to integrate so that, your platform, if it's a food or whatever, people can make payment with Visa, MasterCard, and whatnot, right? So that code that needs to be given to us, that will be given to us from a third party. It needs some work. Our developers will have to look at, the code documentation. And once they look at the code documentation, they will understand it, and then they will say, okay, looking at this code documentation or this API documentation, there's going to be some effort that's going to be needed here. We'll need maybe 2 days or 3 days to work on this API alone, right? So that, we will have people that can pay with, their Visa, MasterCard, and whatnot on the platform, American Express card and, Discover card and other things. They can do that. So they'll look at the amount of work that needs to be done. And of course, are there dependencies? Do we need to have something done before, this story can also be worked on? Are there prerequisites, something that needs to go in first or need to work on? So all these things culminate into the in helping us come to a point where we know we can size a story, right? We can now size a story. We can size a story. So let's look at acceptance criteria. Then I think this is going to be the end for today's session. So let's look at acceptance criteria. So what is acceptance criteria? We've looked at a user story, and we're saying that there are 4 major components or 5 major components of a user story. We have the role, the goal, the expected outcome, and then description or additional information section, and then acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria, they are conditions that a software product must satisfy to be accepted by the user. So as you write the story, you will write it as a user, as a visitor. I want the ability to do this, blah, 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 so that I can do this, fine. So what are the set of things that needs to be there, has to be validated before, so that the condition, the outcome will happen. So you will list all those items, the features that we need to see under the acceptance criteria. So for instance, like our ABC Church platform, and we said that we talk about, donate button. So, and the acceptance criteria, it will list all the things that we need to see when we go over to the donate page. So number 1 or bullet number 1 or bullet, whatever that you use. So 1, users will be presented with a set of options of programs or projects that they can support. Then you italize or indent it and say 1, Titan, 2, offering, 3, maybe other projects around the world that they have out there. All those outreach, projects and programs, they all be listed. So this is something that we need to validate when we go onto that page. Number 2, also that page, we need to have, some, method of payment and whatnot, So all these things will be, will be expressed down in the acceptance criteria, right? So acceptance criteria, there are conditions, okay? There are conditions that a software product or that feature over there must what? Satisfy to be accepted by the user. So every feature will have a set of conditions that what has to be satisfied before it's going to be accepted or before it will meet definition of done, okay? So we talk about grooming session definition of ready. That we're trying to establish the definition of ready. When stories are getting ready to be developed. Now stories have been developed. Now we are testing it. Now we need to pass it and say, okay, now everything looks good. So what will make it look good? We need to establish definition of done. So all the criteria that we need to check. Well, one, okay, this one is there, this one is there, this one is there. Okay, good. Now we've seen everything. So now it meets or satisfies the conditions that we want this feature to be able to have out there. The function is working as expected. So conditions that a software product must what satisfy to be accepted by the user. So the customer or the stakeholder. So the set of statements which describe the user's requirement or features and functionalities of an application. So you list all those things in there. So you see the feature as an end user. So as you're listening, as you list the acceptance criteria, you see the feature as as an end user. That's number one. Number two, you consider functional, non-functional, and performance criteria that are part of that feature, right? That part of that story, right? And you need to check it. You need to make sure that it's there. And acceptance criteria must also be clear and simple, right? Again, the requirement, quality, properties that we talk about. Clear and simple, straight to the point. Don't bring something that is not consistent and unambiguous, stuff here. And then not test combinations as well, right? And so these items will be what the QAs or the test engineers will look at, and they will test it, and then they'll say it meets the definition of done, and then we are done with it. Now let's look at another acronym here. How many minutes do we have? 54. Okay. 654. All right. So let's look at this quick, and then that's it for the day. Acceptance criteria they also have a nature, like a characteristics, and we use the acronym SMART, S-M-A-R-T, SMART acronym. So S means it must be specific, right? Your acceptance criteria must be very specific. This is what we need to check. This is what we need to see. We need to see this. There's going to be a user entry. There's going to be a system generated. So everything that the person needs to see, we need to state it as a statement of fact over there. So specific. Number two, it has to be measurable. So if a page must open 5 seconds, we need to be able to measure it. We need to be able to see that. Don't say the page, the donate page must open in an acceptable time frame. That is going to be chaos. So if it's 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, it's an acceptable time. What is acceptable time to somebody, right? So we need to be specific. We need to be able to measure it, right? So 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 10 seconds, then we know exactly what we're looking at. Acceptance criteria. I think I made a mistake at the heading. Acceptance criteria. I misspelled it. So acceptance criteria must also be achievable. You're not going to put something out there that we cannot achieve it. It's not something that we can attain, right? So it must be achievable. So your acceptance criteria that you put out there must be achievable. We need to be able to fulfill it. So the R also stands for relevant. It has to be relevant as well. It has to be relevant. And then time bound. When must we get this done? When should this feature, turn around? Time bound. So we use the SMART acronym for acceptance criteria. SMART acronym. So we've looked at acceptance criteria, we look at user story sizing, we look at the INVEST acronym, user story grooming, and that's it for the day. Questions. We have some few minutes out here. So questions. I'm going to unmute you guys so that you guys can will be able to unmute yourself and then ask questions. I want to hear from you, not in the chat box. I want to hear from you. So you guys can unmute yourself and then ask questions. I have 3 minutes or so. Be snappy, be quick with your question, and then let's move on. Rather than that, if you have a question, I think it's going to be long, we'll take it tomorrow morning. We need to move. We need to get going. Question. No question? Okay, should I do a pop quiz?
One question.
Yeah, go ahead.
One question. All right. So as part of the software requirement quality
Mm-hmm.
properties, there's prioritize or prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wanted to find out if maybe I'm taking the story and then I've made my own prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
Can that be altered or changed during sprint where the developers come together and kind of realize that maybe my prioritization might not per what they are per their activities,
Mm-hmm.
it might not mine might not be sequential. So my question is, can that be changed during sprint when
Yeah, that's why we said your stories must be negotiable, right? So
okay.
that is why we said the acronym negotiable, the invest. So some must be negotiable. That means you need to be able to bring a story up, and we need to be able to negotiate on it and say, no, 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 let's defer this. Let's do this. We need this in first before this story will be complete. So your story must be negotiable all the time, right? I've got 2 minutes more. Question?
Quick question, Nana.
Yeah. All right, sir.
When we go back to just a little bit of digress, but the other one we started first with the explaining the atomic and those things uniquely identified.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you back in the day when we used to write the test cases, you said, let's say you probably identify them by maybe alphabets or numerical numbers like 4.1 something. Like, is it the same thing or it doesn't matter?
No, so sometimes you might have a table in your requirement, right? So what we're talking about over here, uniquely identified or traceable attributes. You might have like a table, some tabular information in your requirement, and you need to be able to point and reference users back to maybe page 3, session 4.1 or something like that, right? So you need to have it in that set of order. And then if you want to organize it in the way like, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, that is also accepted as well. What we're saying, and I'm getting you guys to at that point is you have to be organized, basically, right? Be organized. All the quality attributes that we've been talking about, all the things that we've been saying, it's all about organization. Don't be precise with your statement. Know exactly what you're putting in. Don't bring stuff up that you cannot defend it. When people ask you questions, they say, I just wrote it. I don't know how this one happened. So present it in a manner that will make sense to your audience, right? That is what we are saying over here, basically.
Okay. Thanks.
Question. So that's it. It's already 7 a.m. So all right, that's it, guys. We will continue. So Monday, yes. So Monday we're getting into projects. So Monday, this weekend, I'm going to take time and get your accounts in Jira. So Monday, we're going to start writing user stories. We're going to start writing stories in Jira. So get ready for that. I'm going to have some of you will start an e-commerce project. Some of you also start a banking project. Some of you will start a church project. I'm going to have several projects that your name is going to be tied to. And I'm going to be giving you guys requirements. And when it comes on Monday, I will create different rooms on this Zoom. And so everybody's going to be in their room, separate room. And I'll be bouncing off from different rooms to the other, make sure that you are on point, guide you when you're writing your story. So all the things that we have talked about with user story, you will now begin to practice with it. You now begin to work with it. So I'm going to be checking how you're presenting your story, you're writing your epic, and all those things. You are identifying your epic in the first place. So we're going to be looking at all these things. So get ready, guys. We are now getting into our meat and potato, right? Our main stuff, and it should be fun. Have a wonderful day and a great weekend as well. We'll see you guys on Monday. And as always, if you have any question, just ping me. You can send me a WhatsApp. I'll get to it. I might not get to it immediately, but I'll get to it sometime, right? So if you have any question, anything, just ping me and I'll get to it. All right. Have a great day and a great weekend as well. See you guys.